Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to day 5 of session 3. This is the final day of this negotiated rulemaking. So we do still have some work to do today. So I'm going to go ahead and do our roll call. And I want to remind everybody, including myself, who did not do it, of the naming protocol for the screens. Can't spell today either. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead. I'd like all negotiators, and alternates, and the advisors to have their cameras on. With that, we'll start with accrediting agencies. Jamie Studley.
Good morning.
Good morning. And the alternate, Mr. Jalon Herbin.
The alternate is Laura Razor King.
I'm sorry, I skipped down. I apologize. I looked down. Maybe I should turn my camera off, Beverly. The alternate, you're right, is Dr. Laura Racer King. I apologize.
Good morning, Cindy. No problem.
Good morning. Civil rights organizations and consumer advocacy organizations. Primary, Ms. Carolyn Fast.
Good morning.
And for real, alternate, Mr. Jalon Herbin.
Morning.
Good morning. Financial aid administrators at post-secondary institutions. Primary, Ms. Samantha Veeder.
Good morning.
Good morning. Alternate is Mr. David Peterson.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Four-year public institutions of higher education, Mr. Marvin Smith is primary.
Morning.
Morning. And Ms. Deborah Stanley is the alternate.
Good morning.
Morning. Legal assistance organizations that represent students and or borrowers. Primary, Mr. Johnson Tyler, who will not be with us today. And therefore, Ms. Jessica Renucci, the alternate, will be at the table all day.
Good morning.
Good morning. Minority serving institutions, Dr. Beverly Hogan is primary.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. And alternate is Miss Ashley Schofield. And I don't believe Ashley is with us today either. Private nonprofit institutions of higher education, primary, Miss Kelly Perry.
Morning, everyone.
Morning. Alternate, Mr. Emmanuel Gilroy.
Good morning and happy Friday.
Good morning, same to you. Proprietary institutions of higher education, Mr. Bradley Adams as primary.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Mr. Michael Lanawet as the alternate.
Good morning.
Morning. State Attorneys General, Mr. Adam Well is primary.
Morning.
Morning. And Ms. Yael Shavit is the alternate. Doesn't look like she has joined us yet. State higher education executive officers, state authorizing agencies and or state regulators of institutions of higher education and or loan servicers. Miss Debbie Cochran is the primary.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. And Mr. David Sokolow is the alternate.
Good morning.
Morning. Students and student loan borrowers, Mr. Ernest Iswego is primary.
Morning, everyone.
Morning. And Mr. Carney King is the alternate. All right, doesn't sound like Carney has joined us yet. Two-year
Sorry,
public.
Cynthia. This is Yael. I think it cut out right when I was trying. I'm having issues with connectivity. I'm going to stay off camera, but I'm here.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting us know, Yael. Okay, so two-year public institutions of higher education, Dr. Ann Kress is primary.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Mr. William Durden is the alternate.
Good morning.
Good morning. U.S. military service members, veterans, or groups representing them, Mr. Travis Hoare as primary.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Mr. Barmak Nassarian as alternate.
Good morning.
Civil rights, Miss Amanda Martinez is primary.
Good morning.
Good morning. So welcome to all of the esteemed negotiators, including, last but not least, the Department of Education, Greg Martin.
Good morning.
Good morning. We move on to our esteemed advisors, compliance auditor with experiencing auditing institutions that participate in the Title IV HEA programs, Mr. David McClintock.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning. And labor economist or an individual with experience in policy research, accountability, and or analysis of higher education data, Dr. Adam Looney. Doesn't appear as Dr. Looney has joined us at this point. Did I miss anyone?
I think Steve Finley from the department said.
Oh, I am so sorry, Steve.
No problem. Good
You're
morning.
sitting there very quiet. I apologize. Steve Finley is from the department from the general counsel's office. All right, with that, like I mentioned when we started, this is your final day. The agenda today is to finish the certification procedures that you were working on yesterday. Moving through that document, including consensus check, and then moving to your final issue paper on 9D10 with the same process ending in a consensus check. I do want to remind all negotiators today that since this is the last day, let's please, when we use our 3-minute comment, to offer new concerns and or amended language, not to restate or indicate support of something already stated. Certainly continue to use the chat for that. And that there will be no public comment today. Greg, is there anything you want to add?
No, Cindy, we can get started whenever you're ready.
I'm ready. Take it away.
All right, I believe Vanessa is driving for us this morning, and so she'll be bringing up the where we are in the paper, and there we are at 668:43. When we left off last evening, we were looking at the language in 668:43 A and A5 Romanet 5. So and it was pointed out by a number of people that the language was inconsistent with what's in 32. So we've gone back and wordsmithed it a little bit, and I will present that here. You can see the changes that we've made. So if an educational program is designed to meet educational requirements for a specific professional license or certification that is required for employment in an occupation or is advertised as meeting such requirements, a list of all states where the institution is aware that the program does and does not meet, such requirements. So we've tried to change the text here to be more consistent with what's in 32. So essentially, so it's absolutely the case that if the institution offers the program in a specific state, that they must be aware that it meets it does meet the licensure requirements. So that would have to be disclosed as such. If they know it does not, they would also be required to disclose that. If an institution is not aware, obviously it wouldn't be offering the program in that state. There could be an instance where maybe a student has never applied from that state, so they've never made a determination, and in that case, the institution would not be required to disclose that. But I think this change does address that inconsistency. But I will open the floor for any discussion on this last piece in 43.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Negotiators, any comments, questions, concerns? Kelly.
Amanda was going to come to the table to ask a question. I couldn't type it as fast as I could just raise my hand. So
Perfect. Thanks, Kelly. Welcome, Emmanuel.
Hi, so I guess I can ask the question now.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is in regards to the changes that, well, were not made regarding paragraph 32 around the state licensing requirements. And so we got some questions from our members, and I think they're pretty valid. And pretty much those questions are what happens to currently enrolled students. So when this goes into effect, and students who are already in the program or have been accepted to the program, but institutions under current regulations have disclosed whether or not those requirements meet state licensing requirements, or they don't, or undetermined that they do, what happens then? Will there be a transition period for institutions to come into compliance with these new requirements to meet all state licensing requirements? Also, my second question is, how are institutions supposed to know when a student moves or seeks employment in another state to ensure that they meet the state licensing requirements of that state to be employed in that state? So once again, an issue that could arise is that a student who's in Florida doing online courses at the University of Alabama decides to move to Wisconsin. Well, University of Alabama needs to make sure that the state licensing requirements in Florida are met, but in order to seek employment, that student may not want to seek employment only in Florida. They may want to seek employment in Wisconsin. And so with how the regulation is drafted, because state licensing requirements need to be met in the states where students seek employment, then that could be very, very tricky for institutions to know exactly how to do that. And currently right now in 600.9, institutions are only required to redisclose to students if that state license requirements are met. So those two questions are questions that I have for the department if they are still unwilling to make any modifications to paragraph 32. Thank you.
With reference to the state's employment, I mean, when we look at 32, in each state in which the institution is located, or in which the institution is located, or in which the students enrolled in the institution are located, the institution must make these. Hold on one second here. Must make these. Must make this determination that the program is indeed eligible. It doesn't require that if students leave the area they're located in to seek employment elsewhere, that obviates. Obviously, the student once the student could leave the state in which he or she is located to seek employment elsewhere. We're not requiring schools to be aware of that. We are requiring that it meets the certification requirements where the student is located or in the state in which the institution is located. So I don't know that that's as much of an issue. So what was the other question? I forgot the other question, Emmanuel, that you were asking.
Yeah, Greg, just a quick response to that. I think the concern is in Romanet 2 when it says seeks employment in that state, qualifies to take any licensure or certification exam that is needed. So one can interpret that to mean in that state, to mean if the student's in Florida taking classes from the University of Alabama, then it's only the state of Florida only. But then it could also be interpreted to mean that the state in whatever the student seeks employment. So that could be Florida, that could be Alabama, that could be Wisconsin. I think there's just some grayness there. And with the proposal, once again, that Barmack and Carolina put out, at least that was clarified a little bit more. And then with our proposal that we had put out, we kind of allowed for this to be a little bit clearer. So I just wanted to reiterate that. But the other question I had was around the transition period. So for institutions that will now have to comply with this, because this is new, what happens to currently enrolled students or students who have already been accepted into the program where this institution did not, obviously, they only disclosed whether or not the program meets state licensing requirements or were unable to determine whether or not they met state licensing requirements. Just, is there going to be a transition period, or how do we make sure institutions comply?
As far as the language goes, the department has determined to stay with the language in 32. However, we are amenable to a transition period. So we can discuss that. What type of a transition period that would be, and if somebody wants to suggest something, then we would have to obviously open discussion on that. But I don't want to put any words in anybody's mouth, so I'm not going to do that. But I'll open the floor for any suggestions about what type of a transition period might be in order.
Okay, thank you. I want to note that Barmac Nasserian is at the table this morning, representing service members and veterans. And with that, Barmac, your hand is up.
Yeah, I certainly defer to the department's judgment on what it wants to do on 32, but I do think Emmanuel's concern, question number 1, is going to prove vexing. And Carolyn and I don't have any pride of authorship in the language we submitted. Quite candidly, that language was the product of very hard work by other people who know a lot more about this stuff. But that language would have handled all of these issues with regard to interstate movement, with regard to changing state standards that even if the student doesn't move, with regard to changing state standards that could alter eligibility of programs because it tied eligibility to the bulletin year. So to whatever extent the department decides to take another look at some point, I would encourage it to do that. I would also point out that to the extent that you do decide to keep the existing language in 32, you need to alter 443C, because 443C doesn't make any sense anymore in light of the changes that are in the current draft, just as a conforming change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Barmac, for that. Jessica, you are up next.
Thanks. I'd like to reiterate the point that I made in a different section, but I think it also applies here, that I think we all have an interest in not stranding students mid-program who are unable to finish with Title IV. And I think that the concerns that are raised by Emmanuel, obviously they're institution-side concerns, but I think those same concerns apply to the student, which is that if this were to apply on day 1, and if it were to be judged in sort of this moving target as a student moves through the program, that there really opens up both difficulty for institutions and how do you do this, and difficulty for students, and like maybe their life circumstances would somehow render them ineligible for Title IV. And so I think that the proposal from Barmac and Carolyn, or some other language that would sort of set this at a point in time at enrollment, is important, in that it, on the one hand, it preserves the important consumer protections that I understand are behind this from Ed's perspective, and that we don't want students to go into these programs without understanding the employment and licensure opportunities. But on the other hand, would protect students is then they wouldn't get stranded mid-program. And so I agree. All that is to say, I agree with Emmanuel, but I think it's also an important point from the other side.
So as far as implementation, I mean, generally with something like this, it would be, you know, we would have to determine the implementation rules so that, you know, would it be, you're saying it would be make it applicable to students who enroll in a program on or after a certain point, so that it wouldn't pertain to students who are currently enrolled in the program, correct?
Right. I think there's two separate problems that Emmanuel raised, and that would solve one of them from my perspective, which is the transition period. Yes, I think it should not cut off aid for students who are mid-program as to the effective date. I think as to the other problem, it's a problem that would exist in perpetuity that Emmanuel is describing about students who, for example, move mid-program. And I think that that needs a different fix that wouldn't necessarily be fixed by the effective date, that would tie the consideration to a point in time that is closer to enrollment, so that if life circumstances change, that those students would not be stranded. Emmanuel, you might have a different perspective, but that's how I see it.
Thank you, Jessica. Emmanuel?
Jessica, I agree with your perspective, and I wanted to uplift in the comments, because I know that everyone who's watching can't read the comments, but my colleague Kelly, I think she made a good suggestion in grandfathering the students who are currently in the program, so they're grandfathered with the current regulations, and then whatever's new, which would, I guess, go into effect July 1st of 2023, there would be, you know, maybe a year to come into compliance with the new standards, or some sort of transition period to then make sure that the next enrolling class into the program institution is abiding by these new rules. They know exactly what they need to do, and everything is pretty clear. But grandfathering the current students and students who have already been accepted to some of these programs, I think is a wonderful idea. So I wanted to lift that up.
Yeah, I think we can, I can, I think right now I can certainly agree to the that it would not affect any students who are currently enrolled in programs. That it would be students who enrolled on or after, if we said the effective date of the rule. But or is this suggestion that even even if we did that it would be effective on or after a certain date? I mean, the implementation date, which would normally be July 1 of a given year, that there be a time period after that before it would be implemented. Is that the suggestion?
Yeah, so I would say if this is implemented July 1st, 2023, which that's the goal, right? So you're going to get these regs out by November 1st of this year, ideally. So this will go to effect July 1st, 2023. Well, by that time, students have already been accepted for the 2023-2024 academic year, ideally, or at least some students have already been accepted for that program. So it seems to make the most sense that then this would kick in for those students who are being accepted for 2024-2025 academic year. Because 2023-2024 would have, that process is already happening.
Okay. All right. So it would give them another additional year to do that. I do want to clarify one thing as far as location goes. I wanted to point out that we do have, and this came from our rules that we did in all these years escape me, but the last time we did negotiated rulemaking, we did on distance and innovation, and that was in I believe it was in 18 or 19. Anyway, I wanted to point out in 600.9 C2 and read this language to you. For purposes of this section, this is in state authorization. Just to clarify there, for purposes of this section, an institution must make a determination in accordance with the institution's policies or procedures regarding the state in which the student is located, which must be applied consistently to all students. The institution must, upon request of the secretary with written documentation, provide the secretary with written documentation of its determination of a student's location. An institution must make a determination regarding the state in which a student is located at the time of the student's initial enrollment in an educational program, and if applicable, upon formal receipt of information from the student in accordance with the institution's procedures that the student's location has changed to another state. So we require this to be, we do give institutions a fair amount of latitude in making this determination. They just have to have a policy or procedure to make such determination. So I want to point that out. As far as offering an additional year, as you suggest, let me ask before we move on, is what kind of support there is for that around the table in general? Could I just ask for brief comments on whether or not the rest of you would be amenable to something like that?
Okay, Greg, do you want comments or do you want like a pseudo temperature check?
Just any comments people have.
Okay, all right, Barmack?
I would certainly support the transition period, but I also want to point out again that even a transition period doesn't address the issue that Emmanuel raised, because the student can be, based on the definition of a location from your state authorization reg, the student can be located somewhere where the program does meet the necessary state criteria, and the student could move to a state where the program does not meet the criteria, and at that point, the program would become ineligible, and the student would become ineligible midstream for Title IV. So you really do have a wrinkle here that I would again suggest you resolve by dealing with at least by limiting the licensure the requirements of Section 32, by tying it to the start of the program, that when somebody starts in a program that is eligible that the application of that potential location change does not alter at least that individual student's continued eligibility for aid. That's going to be a problem. People moving, as you know, Greg, in our area, it's really easy to move out of Maryland into Virginia, into the district. So there are plenty of folks who could easily change their state, their location from one state to another.
Greg, you're on mute if you're speaking to the committee.
Oh, my mistake. I'm very sorry about that. Hold on one moment, please. So in the going back to the definition, where we say an institution must make a determination regarding a state in which the student is located at the time of the institution's initial enrollment in the program. So we don't view it as something where if the student changes location during the program that it becomes ineligible. I want to point that out. As far as a transition period is concerned, we just hold on one second here. Okay, well, just bear one moment, please.
Sure, no problem. We could take a couple more comments if you need it.
Yeah, go ahead. That'd
Okay.
be fine.
All right, okay, Jessica?
Thanks. I hear what you're saying, Greg, but just looking at the chat, it looks like, Barmack just said something, and me and Emmanuel, and then Debbie said something in the chat, and I think Kelly agreed, and Carolyn and Ernest, Beverly. So I think there is and Brad, sorry, not to leave you up, Sam. There is a lot of support here for clarifying that language, and I think it sounds like there may not be a substantive disagreement with the department, but I think that everybody here thinks the same thing, which is this should be determined at the time of initial enrollment. And to the extent that language isn't clear, perhaps it could be more clearly worded. As to the transition period, I'm not opposed in principle, Emmanuel, but I think a lot of the schools that I would be most concerned about are not really on academic year schedules. And so it seems to me I would want it to be the shortest amount of time that you actually need, right? I would think students who are accepted as to July 1st, maybe would all be enrolled by like October 1st. I don't do your job. I'm not exactly sure what date would be reasonable. And so it seems to me like shorter than a year would like preserve needs for schools that are in a more traditional academic year cycle while not allowing schools that are not to evade this. So.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Greg, I see you're off mute. Are you ready, or you want more comments?
You can take more comments.
Okay, all right, great. Emmanuel, you're up next.
I want to respond to my colleague, Jessica. I completely agree with you in what you said, and you actually took the words out of my mouth in a lot of ways. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an entire full year per se. It's just a matter of having time for students who are then being admitted into the program for the next semester or academic year, or however that institution kind of sets that program up to then be held accountable to this standard. And it's not for students who have already currently been enrolled for this award year, or academic year or semester or whatever the case may be, but actually having a buffer period to just ensure that compliance is and everything's communicated clearly. But just to reiterate, Jessica, if that is the case for the department, that it is based on initial enrollment, then it should just mirror, that language should be mirrored more so here, at least, or be consistent, because it arguably is not consistent here, so.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Greg, I'm not seeing any other hands. There are a couple negotiators who did put in the chat that they were in support. I specifically saw Brad and Kelly +1 on the transition in the chat. There may be others.
I
Okay, Greg.
Yeah, speaking to the issue of location. So, we in 32, we say the student, in the state in which the institution is located, or which the student enrolled by the institution is located. And the definition of that is in-state authorization. So that is our definition, and it is applicable across the program. So it absolutely does apply. So it's sort of like if we reference if we say something like, eligible student, well, we have a definition of eligible student that is applicable throughout our regulations. It's the same thing here. So it is based on your initial determination of where the student is located. And that's according to your policies and procedures that you have in place to determine where a student is located. We don't prescribe that. So I did want to clarify that. As for transition, if what's being asked here is for a transition more than just more than just it would apply to new students enrolled on or after effective date. I have to I'm gonna need to think about that. Cynthia, could you give me just give me 5 minutes offline?
Sure.
Can you
Okay.
do that?
Adam, we'll get to you, or did you want to say something to Greg before he takes his?
Yeah, I was just hoping he could repeat that comment just from a minute ago about 32. I believe, Greg, you stated that the reference in 32 to the state in which the student is located references another definition within the reg, and I was wondering if you could just point us to that definition. And I think you were implying that definition solves this issue of when the assessment of the student's state is taken at the time of initial enrollment. So I'm just wondering if you could clarify that, or if I'm getting that wrong.
No, it is the definition found in, and I'm having a difficult time. Hold on a moment here. Let me just ask my
And maybe
colleague.
you could find it after the break. If you could give it.
Yeah, it is. It's a 600 point. It's a 600.9, and I'll see if we can maybe even pull it up on the screen. Just give me give me the time to go back and look.
Yeah, Steve has his hand up, so maybe he can help.
Yeah, I was just going to address what Greg's saying. There is an interplay between this provision and the state authorization requirements in 600.9. Under 600.9, institutions are supposed to keep track of where students are during the course of their enrollment. But the issue here is, I think the one Barmack raised, as to whether the student's eligibility for the program would be based on the student's location and the institution's location at the time of enrollment. And I think that's what we're going to try to clarify in our offline discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Greg, we'll go ahead and take that break for you. If we could
Okay, yeah, before we go, I just wanted to point out to everybody before we go on the break, I have it in my chat, but I'm having difficulty with my screen. So I did what we always do now, which is simply Google it on your phone, because the phone is so much quicker than anything else. So yeah, it is in 600.9 C. That is the state authorization requirement. So I just want to point that out. But yeah, we'll go offline for a few minutes, and thank you very much.
Emmanuel, I'm going to ask you to hold your comment. The department has asked twice to go offline to do some 5 minutes or so work on this. So if you could just please hold your comment until they return, unless it's something new.
Very quick. Maybe we
Is it new?
It's new.
Okay.
Maybe we should just reference that here. Like, just provide a reference to that here. And I think that because you removed it, you're trying to address something else and you removed it. But re-adding that somehow would maybe make that clear for institutions to know that it's based on the location.
So you would like, you want the reference to 600.9 in the text.
Or you could just say initially enrolled. Students initially enrolled by the institution are located, or something like that.
Well, I'll consider putting in a reference to 600.9. I think we can probably do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Greg. We'll go ahead and take that break now. Brady, get the room set up for him. If we could go off the live broadcast, that would Okay, it looks like everyone is back. I'm going to turn it over to Greg.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you for your indulgence with the break. And I was having trouble with my computer and different things on top of each other, so I just went out and got back in. So and that definitely helped, and so I really appreciate that. So for 32, we will certainly incorporate a reference to 600.9 there. So to make it clear that it is the location's a determination at the time of enrollment by the institution in accordance with its procedures. And as far as transition goes, at this time, all I can commit to, we will certainly take a look at it, but all I can commit to at this time is that we would not, upon implementation date, it would be only for students who enroll in the program on or after the implementation date, such that it would not affect any students who were currently enrolled in the program, and it would not result in any loss of eligibility for a student who was enrolled at the time. As far as beyond that, an additional transition period, I'm not in a position to commit to that right now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Greg. Kelly Perry is back at the table for private nonprofits. Kelly?
Thank you. So I have a question about the definition in 600.9, because I need to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, because it does talk about the student's initial enrollment, but it also goes on to talk about, upon formal receipt from the student, that the student's location is changed to another state. So, and it also references policies and procedures. So is this saying that if you make reference to 600.9, that if a student formally notifies an institution that they're moving to another state, that institution then needs to obtain licensure in the state that the student is moving to?
I don't believe that is what it means. I'm going to ask my colleagues to confirm that with me. So if you just hold on a moment, I'll try to get some confirmation on that. What you're talking about in the definition, the institution must make a determination regarding the state in which the student is located at the time of initial enrollment in the educational program, and if applicable, upon formal receipt of information from the student in accordance with the institution's procedures, that the student has changed to another state. I don't believe we would see that as necessitating having to, in the middle of a program, change eligibility. This more has to do with the procedures of the institution, and if the student at the outset of the program informs the student that he or she is changing states. But let me get some. I know that language does seem a little bit amorphous, so let me get some clarification, some more clarification on that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm not seeing any more hands, Greg. With questions. So how do you want to proceed?
Okay. Well, let's proceed to a that's what I was trying to get some clarification. Here we go. Hold on one moment, please.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Okay. Okay, hold on one moment. Just bear with me. I'm going to Steve, do you have any comment on that language?
Yeah, we're still clarifying. So under 600.9, institutions are expected to remain updated if they learn that the student has moved to another location. And that would at least trigger a conversation with the student as to whether the program in which the student is enrolled meets the licensing requirements of that state. I don't think it's supposed to trigger a loss of eligibility under this related provision, but we're waiting for confirmation on that. But it does trigger an updated conversation with the student, which is consistent with what's already in line with 600.9.
But I think the way that it reads, it would trigger ineligibility. And I mean, obviously, you're the one that absolutely has to make that determination. But the way that it reads is that, if a student notifies an institution, which they are required to do, and the institution then says, okay, so let's say the institution moved to Kansas, or the student moved to Kansas, and the institution doesn't meet the licensure requirements in Kansas, so that student then ultimately becomes ineligible because we can't provide that service.
And that's what we're going to try to clarify in this discussion.
So,
we understand the concern that's being raised.
right. I'll just beg everyone's indulgence I hate to call another break just after I call the break, but that's not something I really want to do at this point. But
Well, I mean, if you need it, you need it, Greg.
yeah, you know
Okay.
what? Let's just go. Let's just go. I don't mean to do this, but could I go offline for I just need about not even maybe just call it 5 minutes. And that's all.
I do want to bring to your attention a comment in the chat that Adam Well is proposing that we come back to this once you've come up with the language that incorporates the language in 600.9, just so that you're aware that that comment is there. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So Brady, you want to, and we'll go off the live stream, please. Okay, welcome back. It looks like everyone is back with us. So Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Cindy. And I want to again thank everybody for their indulgence and for whatever negative effect this process might have on my nerves. It does make me a lot sharper person in the end, I think. So it's good. It certainly keeps you on your toes and thinking. So we're going to bring up some new language here. But I want to make it clear that it is not the department's intention to require that once the determination is made at the time of enrollment, it is not our intention to require after that the institution account for changes in location that occurs subsequent to that determination in accordance with the institution's policies. So I'm going to ask my colleague Vanessa to bring that revised language up onto the screen for you. So this is what we're proposing. In each state in which the institution is located, or in which the student is enrolled by the institute, or in which students enrolled by the institution are located, as determined at the time of initial enrollment in accordance with the requirements of 34 CFR 600.9C2, the institution must ensure each program is eligible for Title IV program funds. So you can see here that we are, just so there's no confusion, that we are restricting this to the determination made at the time of initial enrollment by the institution in accordance with the institution's procedures and policies and procedures for doing so. And that what is in 3 that we had to put in there for state authorization purposes, that involves the formal receipt of information that the student has changed location, is not applicable in 32. And so with that, I will we can take any comments related to this particular provision, and then I want to move to a consensus vote.
Sounds good, Greg. Thanks. So the department will is open to any comments on the change in that particular section that they just discussed, and then after that we will move to consensus.
Before that, I want to thank the negotiators for reviewing the reg and bringing to our attention the inconsistency, and just want to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Greg, I'm not seeing any hands, so.
Okay, we can move to a consensus vote on issue paper 6.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take the consensus check on issue paper 6, certification procedures. Please hold your thumbs up. We will call out each individual vote as we move on, and as in the previous past, we will ask any dissents to please clearly list your serious reservation, clearly list it, and briefly offer what it would take to get you to consensus. So with that, could I please see a show of thumbs? All right, Jessica is down, Ernest is down, Barmack is up, Carolyn is up, Ann Kress is down, Kelly is down, Sam Beater is sideways, Jamie is sideways, Amanda is down, Brad is down, Adam is thumbs up, Debbie is thumbs up, Marvin is sideways, and Beverly is sideways. Okay, so we have Jessica, Ernest, Ann, Kelly, Amanda, and Brad. That demonstrated dissent. So I'm going to start with Ernest. If you could please clearly articulate a list of what your concerns are and any what it would take to get you to consensus on this.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to start by saying I really greatly appreciate a lot of the things the department has tried to do in this rec. I strongly support the consumer protection language that's been offered up in this document. I think the fix to 32 is really important. You know, I even appreciate a bit of the explanation that was given on the transcript withholding piece yesterday. I have to be honest in that there were conversations and things brought up in the chat afterwards, and generally I feel like, and I can understand why this was the case, but generally I feel like we really tried to rush through the transcript withholding piece, which honestly I found a little bit concerning, since I mentioned that that was something of great importance to my constituency, but then also to me personally. Look, in full disclosure, I'm pretty confident maybe the only person in this Zoom who does not have a post-secondary credential, in significant part because of the conflict that transcript withholding played in my life. And while I appreciate and I think the language offered by the department, and I would even urge them to consider starting at that point, covers a lot of the concerns and issues around this, I am still struggling to understand where the department doesn't have the authority on transcript withholding to act on transcript withholding as part of the PPAs that it does on, say, arbitration agreements, as happened last session. If the question is about like what the legal federal interest is in doing this, I would turn back point, cite, you know, the CFPB's comments on this. We know that schools, we know that institutions like transcript withholding in part because it helps lock students to those specific institutions. I'm pretty sure we've even seen examples of where transcript withholding has been used to push students into institutional loans to continue their education at an institution, or private loans to have less safe returns terms of federal student loans. Ultimately, I still feel like that undermines the government's investment in these students. I mean, when an institution has the latitude to lock a student's entire academic history and record and their educational progress away, and in some cases even conceal the fact that a student has done everything necessary to earn a degree, that just, to me, it feels like grounds to take stronger action on for personal reasons.
Ernest, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. For the reasons stories I've heard from my students, and just kind of legal reasons. It's absolutely a tactic that I think bad actor institutions, to the point where we're all trying to solve, can use to hide wrongdoing. Plus, I would add that, you know, it definitely encourages students to pay back these private institutional loans rather than their federal loans, which also I think kind of serves the you know, kind of contrary to the federal interest as well.
Ernest,
So
your time is up.
that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anne, you are next. Please clearly articulate a list of your concerns and a resolution that could get you to consensus.
Sure, thank you. And again, support a lot of what's going on in this issue paper, but the two-year colleges, community colleges concerns are with number 26 and the licensure program length issue. As I stated earlier, my real concern is that I understand the department has issues with the length of some of these professionally licensed programs at the state level, but that's really where this needs to be directed. As written, it's going to punish students who have no choice over what state that they take these licensed programs in. The students we're talking about can't simply pick up from one state and move to another in order to engage in a shorter program length that meets the department's expectations. So a few solutions to this language. One would be to revert to prior language. Another would be simply to revert back to saying greater rather than lesser in the text, which was changed in this iteration. And then finally, something to think about, since the goal seems to be to motivate states to shorten the program length, and I get that, and we support that, but to give a transition period. that would allow for all of the steps that need to occur for program length to be shortened to take place, recognizing that you have state actors, board actors, institutional actors, and that we would want students to be grandfathered in during that process. Again, completely understand the desire to have as efficient and expedient program lengths as possible, but as written right now, the folks who will be punished if that doesn't happen isn't the individuals who are designing the programs, it's the students who are in them.
Thank you, Anne. Next, Kelly, can we get a list of the areas that are of concern to you, as well as what it would take to get you to consensus?
Sure, thank you. I will echo Dan's comments on 26. I think the change from greater to lesser is a concern of our constituency. And then the second thing is the language of 32. You know, we were able to get on board with what was proposed by Carolyn and Barmack, and was hoping that the department would consider that language. The language as written does not work, and we would need Romanet 3 removed from that language.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Appreciate it. Amanda, you're next.
So I would like to align the issues of paragraph 20. There's issues with paragraph 26, as Anne eloquently already described, but I would say that I think the education department's policy goal here to ensure programs show a reasonable relationship. I think the session 2 language, while I don't have the solution to the problem or what specific language I would be looking for, I just think that session 3's language in paragraph 26 ultimately puts unintended consequences on students, when I don't think that's necessarily the solution or the intention of the department. I think they're trying to solve a problem, which I think there is a problem here. I think they have an interest in ensuring programs, licensure programs, aren't going farther than providing too many clock hours that are unnecessary. So I think that there's a true problem there. I think it really the department should go look back and try to be creative in whatever new solution that they're proposing. I don't have the answers to that, but I do think session 2's language is a bit more, it doesn't put the harm on students there, and it really targets the clock hours. But ultimately, I'm not an expert there. I just do think that 26, as it reads now, is not the way to go forward. Also, paragraph 32, I strongly support paragraph 32. That's not what I have issues with. I think supporting student consumer protection is well needed, and it's lacking in our current higher education federal system. So just leaning on institutions and across the board states to go to bat for students. I think states have a role here, and just simply leaning on institutions to do that and trusting them. I think they've proven time and time again that we cannot trust them, at least from a student perspective, and even more so from students who are historically excluded from higher education. We really can't trust our institutions because they really weren't made for them. So ensuring that the bar is raised and that we empower our states who want to go to bat for students, especially historically marginalized, I think that's a great path forward in the right direction, and the federal, the education department has a role there. So I strongly support that. That's not where my dissent is. My last dissent is really with paragraph 33. Again, it's a good attempt, and I really appreciate your attempt here in working with what you have. I just think the legal reasoning, we have to go back. I would really strongly urge you to go back and rethink your legal strategy here, and try to be more, look at different options versus maybe a limited narrow scope.
Thank you, Amanda. Brad, you're next. Need your list of concerns and your potentials to get you to consensus.
Yes, and thank you. And I sent in comments in week 2, and so I'm going to reference the sections where I've got problems, but really to give me the consensus, it would be going to that language that I've already sent, and I won't reread that to everybody on the committee. So in 668, got 13, 3C1, Romanet 1F, where it gives the secretary complete discretion to put anyone on a provisional certification for any reason. That was one of our concerns. Also second what Ann and Amanda have both said around 26. On the state hour cap issue, we really thought we should just leave it as is, and all the changes we think are not necessary. Lastly, the entire provision within 32, we've got concerns with. I think the pre-accreditation issue got solved, although I've got to double check that, but the whole reciprocity arrangement issues that we've been discussing and consumer protections, we've got problems with. So those are the main 3 areas of concern. Thank you.
Those that have been raised, but I just want to state them much more specifically so that I hope the department understands. This is not a vote that I want to be making because I really think that there are important things in here. I would specifically point to the state authorization and consumer protection language. I really applaud the department for that. I do not want to downvote a proposal with that language in it, but I'm doing it for 2 reasons. One is on 26, there are 2 separate issues, one of which was very clearly articulated by Ann and Kelly, and I think it's not a deal breaker for me. I understand your position. The issue that's a deal breaker for me is that the department, in deciding that these programs should be ineligible, instead of just excluding students from eligibility, has designed a method where students come into a program that they cannot finish with Title IV, where the department knows that, the institution knows that, the students aren't going to understand that. You said yesterday there's no other place in the Title IV program where that happens for students, and I just cannot support a proposal that sets a precedent that we're going to have programs that we know from the outset can only be partially funded by Title IV, and I hope the department really takes a look at that again, because I don't think anyone here thinks that that is in the student's best interest. I would be fine reverting to the Session 2 language. I also, to be clear, am fine with the department's stated reasoning for that, which was that non-Title IV students should be able to participate in those programs. That's fine. My concern is with Title IV students who can start but not complete with Title IV. As to the transcript piece of the second thesis, so sorry, just to be clear, I would be fine reverting to the second proposal. I think on the transcript withholding piece, I echo Ernest and Amanda's position that I was disheartened by, I think, the legal justification that seems inconsistent with what Ed has done before and the lack of fulsome discussion about it. I appreciate that Ed is taking steps to solve this problem, but I do have concerns that the language in 33 is potentially worse than not having language at all, to the extent that it's a tacit approval of all other transcript withholding. And I would hope that the preemption arguments would lose, but I do think that it would pose preemption problems. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Did I miss anyone that dissented? I don't. Okay, so that concludes issue paper 6, certification procedures. We're now going to move on to issue paper 7, which is your final document on the 9010. So with that, Greg, you want to start walking through that?
Sure. A couple of things here before we start with that. I am aware that there has been some language offered and some discussion involving A3, revenue generated from programs and activities. What I'd like to do is walk through that. When we get to it, we'll walk through it and walk through the paper, and then we'll be discussing these sections. And I know that Brad has some language, and I would ask him to discuss what he suggests there. At the end of the paper, if the department has an offer of different language, then I would put that up. But I think I'll walk through the paper the paper first. But before we do that, I want to draw everybody's attention to the fact that you do have Appendix C in this in this round. So you've looked at Appendix C to Subpart B, and I just want to introduce that briefly as that is the Appendix C is the accounting protocol for how institutions are to actually calculate 90/10. So what is in Appendix C is meant to reflect absolutely what is in the regulation. It's simply the protocol for actually doing the calculation. So I'm not going to walk through every line item of it. Your advisor, David McClintock, who has a lot of experience in working with certainly current Appendix C and has looked at the revised Appendix C, I know he has some comments he wants to make, and I want to give him the opportunity to do that. So, David, can I ask you, did you want us to put up the new Appendix C for you? Is that what you intended? Joe, while you make your comments?
Yeah, it might make sense to pull up maybe even the current version and people have a copy. I assume you want to do it now. And, Appendix C wasn't in the issue paper, so I wasn't sure when to ask the clarifying question.
Right, I think we can do it now. We can do it now, David, just because I want to get people aware of it. This is current Appendix C. Did you have an old Appendix C you wanted to show people?
It was Cindy circulated it to the group, so we can only pull up one at a time. Maybe pull up the old one and people have a copy of the current. We can do it that way. And some of it, Greg, I just want to make some clarifications. I know you've been, the department's been making changes to many issue papers and working through things. So I know there's been a lot to update. If you could pull up maybe the old Appendix C that I sent around.
Oh, hold on.
Sorry. I know I switched the suggestion.
No, I wonder if Vanessa can pull up the old Appendix C.
And if you can just scroll down just a little bit, Vanessa.
Right, there we go. This is current Appendix C, just to be clear.
Okay,
go ahead,
so, David. No, it's fine. And I just want to clarify. So in the Appendix C that was circulated as an update to the calculation, there's a couple of key differences, and I just want to make sure that they were not intentional and you will make the adjustment. So the third to last line in the chart we're looking at, it refers to a revenue adjustment here. And in the updated charts in the appendix that was circulated, it seems to have been changed to refunds paid to the student. And the difference is, if you received any funding, whether it's federal or non-federal funding above the institutional charges, whether or not you've paid that money to the student, it does not get included in the 90/10 calculation, the way that it works. And I just want to make sure that's still the way you intend the 90/10 calculation to work. So it's not money paid to the student, it's the excess cash received. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then similarly, the new calculation does not have that line for the Title IV funds returned due to the R2T4. The CFR reference there is to the refund calculations. And so you'll be adding a line in there just to comply with the current calc. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll take these. We do have our accounting expert who actually did the new appendix, so she is monitoring this. So as you go through these, Dave, Rhonda will probably be looking at this, so I'll let you know. But yeah, continue.
Okay, and again, I think they're unintentional changes. I just want to clarify it. I guess a suggestion or a question I would have is, having gone through 90/10 calculations with schools, I think it would be easier, just the way it gets tracked and recorded, to include all those federal funds, even the new sources, into a single section. The new Appendix C has them broken out into a couple of different categories, and the way schools are going to do the calculation is say, okay, here's all the charges that have occurred, and start applying those federal funds in order and breaking it out into two pieces. Could add some complexities. It won't change the rate. It just might make the calculation easier.
Thanks.
But I think those are really the two main clarifications. I just wanted to make sure that I understood.
All right, thanks, Dave. I'll try to get some feedback on that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
All right, Vanessa, do you want to put up the language again? Thanks. Okay, so we're looking at 668.28. This is non-Title IV federal revenue, or 9010, and in A general here in A1 Romanet 1, we have updated this language here to reflect the intent, updated the wording rather to reflect the intent of the language. And you'll see here that this is for any, so in Romanet 1, for any audit submission for a proprietary institutional fiscal year beginning on or after January 1, 2023, federal funds used to calculate the revenue percentage include Title IV HEA program funds and any other educational assistance funds provided by a federal agency directly to an institution or a student, including the federal portion of any grant funds provided by or administered by a non-federal agency, except for non-Title IV federal funds provided directly to a student to cover expenses other than tuition and fees and other institutional charges. We did correct that. That was originally books and supplies, and as was pointed out, books or supplies may or may not be institutional charges. So and that was we had that discussion, I believe, at the last session, and so we cleaned up that language to comply, to make it consistent with the treatment of institutional and non-institutional charges. So it would just be other institutional charges there. And moving on to let's see what we are here. A2 Romanet 2 A. We fixed a typo here, and the heightened has changed to heightened cash monitoring. And in B, we have made some slight revisions to the language here for clarity. So in B, for institutions under the reimbursements or heightened cash monitoring methods in 668, 162C or D2, make disbursements to those students by the end of the fiscal year and report as federal funds in the revenue calculations the funds that the students are eligible to receive before requesting funds. So that was the just some clarifying language made in that section. And the next change is in 5 on page 3, so we'll go there. Thank you, Vanessa. And here we have added the word principal to clarify that it is consistent with current practices. So this is revenue generated from institutional aid, and the institution may include the following institutional aid as revenue: for loans made to students and credited in full to the student's account at the institution and used to satisfy tuition fees and other institutional charges. The amount of principal payments made on those loans by current or former students at the institution, or rather that the institution received during the fiscal year. And I will stop there for now and entertain any comments or discussion about what we have discussed thus far.
thank you, Greg. Brad.
Thank you. I've got just a couple questions in here, and one Romanet 1, and I've asked this a couple times, and we really do need to get an answer on it, because the HERF money is going to, it could essentially run out past the effective date of this issue paper of July 1 of 23. So we really need to know, is HERF money considered federal money?
HERF money is not counted under 9010.
Thank you. We would still like to see in that Federal Register a statement that basically says that any new fund sources that occur during the year take effect for the institution in their next fiscal year following the publication in the Federal Register. Our concern is that if something like HERF were to come up in the middle of the year and it was counted towards the 90, that we would not know that, and it would impact us potentially negatively. So I'll just leave that comment that was issued in my week 2 as still there. I see Mr. Finley's hand up, so I'm going to let him speak now. Or actually, I'm sorry, the facilitator, I'll defer to you. Sorry.
Oh, you're all good. It's all right. I'm not territorial. So go ahead, Steve.
I just wanted to maybe ask a clarifying question and then explain why I'm asking it. And the question is, when you're asking about HERF funds and whether they count, are you talking about HERF funds that were paid directly to the institution for the institution, or HERF funds that the institution received on behalf of its students that were used to pay charges for those students to the institution?
Both.
I'm not clear whether the funds paid to the students that were used to pay student charges. I think we need to discuss internally whether those are counted for 9010 or not.
Yeah, proprietary schools weren't allowed to use any HERF money for institutional charges. So, I mean, I'm sorry, for student credit balances. So
okay, so that's not really an issue.
It's not an issue for us, no. Only the nonprofits got that opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Brad.
Second question. I've still got a little concern on the way I guess it is in, I'm sorry, 2 Romanet 2, how it's worded there. Again, our main concerns are that, we follow institutional policies around requesting funds, and then we follow those policies. So I understand the comments that the department has made in the past around what they perceive as gaming the system. But again, we want to just make 100% sure that if we're following our own institutional practices, just because the charge was eligible to be pulled down, we're not going to get dinged for not pulling the money down. Again, I've given you examples of the last 2 sessions where our fiscal year end quarter starts right before that fiscal year end, and administratively it would be impossible for us to get all the money in by that fiscal year end within a day or 2. And so we're still concerned with the wording here.
Brad, you have 30 seconds.
Yep. So, department, I don't know, maybe you can respond to my concern that, should we add some language here about making it, following institutional policies or normal course of businesses here, that we should be able to be okay under 2 Romanet 2.
I could say, it's not the department's intention to do a gotcha where a program start is right on that cusp, and where it's not that, for instance, if it's the institution's policy to post disbursements and then draw, and that happened a couple of days later, and put that in the next fiscal year. I think you'd have, I don't know, I understand it saying you can trust the department's discretion is basically just saying that is a matter of trust here. We feel we need this in order to stop this practice of intentionally delaying those draws of funds into the next year in order to affect the 9010 calculation. We would not be amenable to putting anything in here that would inhibit our ability to do that. I hesitate to go in the direction of school policy, because some schools could conceivably hide behind that policy in order to continue doing the practice, continuing with the practice that we're seeking to end here. So that's our concern. I don't know if Steve has any additional comments on that, but I'll ask.
I don't have anything to add right now. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, thank you. Before we move, Dave, I see your hand up, the advisor. I just need to make a couple announcements. Will Durden is at the table for community colleges. Emmanuel Gilroy is at the table for private nonprofit institutions. Carney King has joined the table for students and student loan borrowers. And Jaylon Herbin appears to be at the table in place of Carolyn Fast. Is that correct, Jaylon? Okay. All right. With that, Dave, take it away.
Yeah, Greg, I just want to build on what Brad was saying, just from an auditor perspective. And here's how I would envision evaluating this. The way it's written, it would be very difficult to determine if a student is meeting it or not. As an auditor and understanding, I think what the department is trying to do, schools have terms that begin throughout the year, right? And have a pretty consistent timing of when they draw down funds. Do they wait 2 weeks after a drop add period? Do they wait 30 days? So I think as an auditor, we could establish what is their policy as far as when they draw down aid for a term, and then comparing what they do at year end to those other processes. At least it would give a benchmark as an auditor for something to compare it to. The way it's written, it would be difficult, I think, to determine.
So Dave, if I hear you correctly, you're saying that if it were incorporated that if institutional policy was such that they wait us to a certain point to draw the funds, as you pointed out, maybe to wait for that drop to be over or something like that, that could be considered if in following that policy, the draw occurred in the next fiscal year, right? You're saying it would give you something as an auditor to a standard to apply and to say that, well, clearly the institution applied it here, but here it's obvious that they went 4 or 5 weeks to get over into the next fiscal year, right?
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to do is purely delaying drawdowns only to past 90/10, and I understand the reasoning. Yeah, the example is, a lot of schools wait until the drop add because otherwise you pay Pell to a bunch of students and they change their enrollment status and you have to adjust it. So as long as they're following similar timing, I think it would meet the requirement. If there's a little tweak to the language to imply that, I think it would really help as an auditor to understand it.
Yeah, I understand that concern. I'm trying to think if there's any way we can incorporate something that would that might address that. We're coming down to the wire here. I'll take that back, and we probably will have a lunch because we're getting up to that hour. So maybe I can take that back and see if we would be amenable to a change there to clarify that without undermining the intent of the regulation.
Right.
Can't promise anything, but I will take it back.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Adam, you're up next.
Yeah, I was hoping to talk about A5 at the bottom of page 3. So unless if there's more discussion on the topic that we're on right now, I can wait and let Brad speak.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we've gone that far, right? Brad, is your comment?
No, we went through A5, I believe. So comments on A5 are plenty.
Okay, yeah, I was on the one.
3, Romanet 3, so I'm fine. If Adam wants to jump to 5, I'm good either way, but I'm done with the subject we just talked about, and I'll wait on the department to respond.
I don't mind the jumping around. It doesn't bother me. We covered all of it.
Okay, so Adam.
Sure. So the AG reps circulated a memo on this earlier this week, but I just want to say as to A5, I'm glad the department inserted the provision around including only principal payments. I think without that, it would incentivize institutions to impose higher interest rates on these types of loans, and this is more consistent with the purpose of 90/10. We proposed changes to this section to clarify that these institutional loans that are covered by A5 would include ISAs, income share agreements that are offered by institutions. These income share agreements, these are financial products that defer a debt obligation. They create a debt based on payment of a finance charge over time. They should fall under this section for institutional loans. The CFPB, which enforces the Truth in Lending Act, which has provisions around private education loans like this, has taken this position. Other regulators have taken this position. The Department of Ed recently clarified this position just a matter of a week or two ago. So I think consistent with that, income share agreements should be covered within this section regarding institutional loans to the extent those ISAs are offered by institutions, their affiliates. I think that would be consistent and avoid confusion about how income share agreements are treated, whether it's under this provision or the separate provision that Ed has proposed. I do appreciate the intention of the separate provision, which we haven't gotten to yet on page 4 regarding income share agreements, and that there's some consumer protections around those income share agreements. I would submit, however, that to the extent institutional loans are regulated by state law, it's not preempted by federal law. These are not federal loans. So state protections around deceptive practices, usury, state licensing, those are in place. Truth in Lending Act, those are in place for these types of loans. And so, you know, there would be a lot of the consumer protections that are pretty minimal that are identified in the separate section would be covered by Truth in Lending Act, the Dodd-Frank law, other things like that. So I would strongly urge the department to kind of
30 seconds.
Wrap the income share agreements, clarify that income share agreements are covered within section A5. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Will. Brad?
You want Dave to go ahead? He's got his hand raised. I'm okay with him.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave. I thought your hand was a residual.
No, I'm sorry. I did think there's two. Well, I have one clarification. I just want to make two now. So something that Brad said, proprietary schools currently were able for HERF 2 and 3, if they participated with written authorization from students to use those funds to help pay down balances. So the HERF 1 was not, the HERF 2 was. It's not part of 9010 now because we're talking about in the future, obviously, for that inclusion. And then just to clarify as well, I think it's good the department added the word principal to make it more specific. It's always only, our interpretation, it always has only included principal again because of the clarification of the institutional charges that are included. And an interest expense is not an institutional charge that can be incorporated in the calculation, but certainly adding the word principal makes it even more clear, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Brad?
All right, I'm going to ask a question on 3, Romanet 3, and then I'm going to request a caucus to get us up through lunch, if that's okay. My question is around, you know, the fact that when Congress approved the bill to change the wording as part of COVID, to change the wording from Title IV funds to all federal funds to move to the 90, they didn't approve any changes for the 10, and I don't think that was their intent. And so my question is really, what's the department's interpretation? I know opening up this issue paper allows you to make other changes, but why we're taking out the components of 3 Romanet 3, everything that we're deleting here, when I believe Congress's intention was to clean up the 90 side of the balance sheet. And then after you respond, Greg, I do want to request a caucus for the last 10 minutes before lunch.
Okay, I have no problem with the caucus, so we'll let the facilitators deal with that when it gets time for that. I do want to say, before I respond to you, Brad, I do want to respond, and we'll get to this. We just haven't got there yet because we started with 5 and we did loans, but I do want to clarify that under Section 5, which is revenue generated from institutional aid, we do indeed address the income share agreements, which are under 5, Romanet 3. So we haven't got there yet. So I do want to point out that it is there. So back to your question, Brad. Why do we remove those? Well, we go back to the spirit and intent of 9010, which is that that a school's programs be, and I'll maybe ask Steve to add to this, but that a school's programs be such that students are willing to be of such quality that students are willing to pay some cash for those programs, so that it wouldn't just be Title IV funds that cover those expenses for those eligible programs. And that does key to schools' eligible programs, that students are willing to pay for those programs the school is offering and for which they are receiving Title IV funds. This income is ancillary and not related to that principle. So that is why we in these regulations made the changes that we did in Romanet 3. And Steve, do you want to add to that at all?
No, I think that's it generally. I mean, the department took a look at the current regulations on how the revenues were counted under 9010, and we've looked at experience we've had over the years of areas where it seemed like some revenue sources were being created to count on the 10 side, and we tried to evaluate, as Greg just mentioned, whether that was consistent with what we thought the purpose was for 9010. So that's why you're seeing these proposed changes now. And, I think that's it to explain, where we're coming from.
I don't want to impinge on the time that Brad has for the caucus, so I don't know what the facilitators want to do, but we could take questions certainly after lunch or however we want to.
Yeah, so I think I've got some proposed language that we'll discuss during the caucus that may get to the intent that the department is looking for there. And do I need to formally request who I'd like in the caucus for the video?
Yeah, just hang on one second, Brad. Adam, can your comment wait till after lunch so that we can afford Brad the time that he requested for his caucus?
That's fine. I just wanted to clarify something on section 5. So that addressed Greg's comment a second ago, but I can wait till after the caucus.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks. Yes, Brad, before we break the live stream, we need to have it on the record who will be in the caucus, who you're requesting to attend the caucus. Then we will stop the live stream and Brady will finalize the setup of that caucus room and move everyone into it. Okay.
Yes, thank you. I would like the representatives from service members and vets and the ed negotiator, Mr. Greg Martin, to attend in the caucus. And that's all I needed.
Okay. So do you want the alternate and primary?
Yes, please.
Okay. Is the department okay with that?
Yes. I would ask, could would you be okay if I brought counsel with me?
Yes.
Okay, so add Steve to that, please.
Okay, so add Steve to it. All right, so we have both the primary and alternate from the service members and veterans representatives, the department's negotiator, as well as the department's general counsel. So we can break live. We will take a lunch. We will come back at 1 p.m. Okay. So for the rest of you, with that, I think we can go ahead and stop the live stream. Brady probably already has the rooms ready.